Hey guys, thanks for hopping on to this week's episode of the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast. I'm Brendan Harden, and I'm joined today by Dre, and I'm going to butcher your name even though we just went over it. Fornasiero?
You got it, brother.
Perfect. All right, Dre, thank you so much for joining me. You are in Iowa, we were just talking, and you mentioned you've lived a little bit of everywhere. What made you decide that Iowa was home?
Iowa's awesome, by the way. It's got some of the best fishing on the planet. I mean, aside from the saltwater stuff, but in the country, like, for sure. My wife's from Iowa, so that's probably the biggest reason.
Okay.
And I just keep coming back here, man. It's a really killer fishery.
Good to know. I haven't made my way out there yet. I do plan on hopefully making it over there eventually, but
You're welcome, but if anybody else asks, tell them the fishing sucks.
I can definitely do that. Anyone listening to that, just remember the fishing sucks in Iowa.
Yes, there's no trout here. The smallmouth are super tiny. The carp fishing is really, really bad. Like, you shouldn't come here.
No, absolutely horrible. So, Dre, let's get into things a little bit. How did you get started in Tenkara fishing?
So I Western fly fished for a little while and kind of hated. So I started in Colorado is when I started kind of fly fishing pretty heavily. And I sort of hated all the guys that did it.
Okay.
They're like, the like PT cruiser with a snorkel on it that, never sees a day of dirt. It's just, and I just didn't like the people. And it was, I'm good at it because I still do it, but like, it's overly complicated, like completely overly complicated. Like, fish are not that smart,
I don't disagree with you there.
And I got like most of us, I got a TUSA rod and started fishing for trout and on high gradient stuff in Colorado and kind of fell in love with it. It's, it was just kind of an aha moment, and I kept it up and kind of bounced back and forth a little bit because I guide too. So, and most of my clients are all Western guys, and gals. So I kind of have to keep those skills up as well.
Right.
But mainly, like, I was thinking about this earlier because I kind of figured you'd ask me, I'm trying to think, like, mainly, I think I only fished, the only time I don't fish Tenkara, like, almost exclusively, is, like, really early season, like, just after ice out pond fishing. Because the fish are, you know what I mean? I'm, like, double hauling 60 feet to catch, like, a 6-inch crappie. You know what I mean? Like, they're just so deep. But other than that, man, I mean, that's really, kind of how I got started. Just, high gradient streams and, in Colorado, just trying to avoid people. And fishing in plain sight, too, was kind of fun, too, because a lot of guys up there will just sort of hike into the middle of nowhere, but everyone's hiking into the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So, like, the best fishing I ever had in Colorado was, like, literally in town in Golden. Because nobody would fish there because it doesn't look like the river runs through it. And the Tenkara rod for like little stuff like that, like picking apart pocket water and stuff like it's the best tool for the job, like, by far.
Absolutely. No, I've got a few fisheries just a few minutes up the road from me that are the same way. People just walk past them, and I was actually up one last year, and this guy walked by and he's like, "I don't think there's any fish in here." And I'm like, "Nope, no fish in here. Haven't seen one."
Yep. My answer is usually, I didn't think there was any fish in there. I'm like, all kinds, man. Like, generally, anywhere you see water, for the most part, there's probably fish in there.
Absolutely. And it's crazy how many people don't realize that. And they, like, these little canals and stuff that run through the big cities and things like that, people just look at them and they're like, "Oh, it's just a canal. Like, that's it. It dries up for half the year." Well, the half of the year that there's water in it, there's probably fish in there.
Big fish in Colorado, man. Downtown Golden, 18-inch brown, sip to dry. Never came even close to anything that big. I mean, I didn't fish like Deckers and Cheeseman all that much just because it was nigh impossible, and that's not really why I fly fish, to be, close to all those people. But yeah, man, it was, I mean, fish in plain sight. Like, that's my, fish out your back door, fish wherever. You don't have to you know, I work for a fly shop now and I guide, so I do a lot of like there's this fly shop sponsors a lot of trips. Like the owners in Belize right now, they're fishing for bones and baby tarpon and stuff, and that's super cool. But like, not everyone can pony up like 10 grand to go fishing.
I definitely get that.
You know, just go somewhere. Get, you know, on a 4 weight, you know, an 8-inch bluegill is like the best fight you're ever gonna have. Or on a, you know, on a Tenkara rod, like, you know, I mean, yeah. So,
So you got started while you were in Colorado. How long ago would you say that was when you started?
it's about 10, going on 10 years or so.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're one of the OGs to the Tenkara in the States then.
I'm a little OG. I mean, I'm not like, you know, I'm not like Mike Agnetta OG, but I'm like pretty close to OG. Like most people that I talked to when I started doing it had never heard of it and thought it was just fancy cane pole fishing. And
Absolutely.
in fact, that's how I talk to all my gear friends. They go, you know, I'll shoot them a picture of some fish I caught and they go, oh, what'd you catch it on? And I said, I give them one of two answers. If it's the Tenkara rod, I say my fancy cane pole. And if it's my Western rod, I tell them it's my fancy whippy stick.
There you go. For those of you that don't know, 10 years ago is pretty early in the Tenkara scene in the U.S. Tenkara didn't really make its way to the U.S. until 2009. And so it's still fairly new over here. It is growing very fast, which is great to see. And what I hope to help people realize is there's more ways to catch fish and it doesn't have to be complicated.
At all. At all.
So when you did start getting into Tenkara, when did you feel like you were starting to finally figure it out?
Like immediately. Like immediately.
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
It doesn't at all. It's so ridiculously intuitive. Like most of the people that I turn it on, or, you know, get them into Tenkara, they are a lot of times that they're Western guys and gals that are fishing with me while I'm fishing Tenkara, and they're just like, I don't get it. Like, how are you doubling me up on fish? Like, how are you doing it? I'm like, dude, because this is ridiculously intuitive, and it's super simple, but it's also extremely complicated at the same time. You know, like you can make it as complicated as you want or as easy as you want. I mean, you're probably going to catch just as much fish just getting the fly wet as you would, like, you know, like, I mean, I geek out on it, right? Like, I'm trying to anchor my flies in like fish deep pools with unweighted, you know, I'm trying to do all this stuff. But the reality is, man, half the time I just get the fly wet and the fish eats it. It looks like everything they eat. It's the most suggestive pattern ever, any kind of kabari.
Yeah.
You know, especially if it's in that, you know, I don't actually even really fish flies that are that small, to be honest with you. I mean, I fished all last winter with like, I think the smallest the smallest kabari I fished was like a 14. And it was basically the same pattern. And that's what's really cool about it, because that's what attracted me to fly fishing to begin with, was the reading the water, right? Like when you're spin fishing, man, you're just covering water. You bomb a cast out there 130 feet or whatever it is, and you just motor that thing back, and you're putting that lure in front of every fish that lives, you know. And Tenkara is I mean, that the reading of the water is really kind of my geek, and Tenkara is the perfect tool for that.
Absolutely. And no, like you said, you catch more fish doing it, which when I first started, it was just like, how? It doesn't make sense. But if your fly is in the water more, you're going to catch more fish.
Right. And less of your line is in the water, which spooks way less fish. Exactly. It's funny because when I go back to because I switch back and forth, you know, and when I go back to fishing my Western rod, man, I'm like baffled, because for the first like 10 minutes, I line every fish that exists, because it's just not anything that I need to think about when I'm Tenkara fishing, because literally almost the only thing in the water is the kabari. That's it. So, you know.
So you've mentioned kabari a few times. Is that your go-to fly then, is a kabari?
Yes and no is the answer to that question.
All right.
So I love to tie. If anybody follows any of the stuff I do, I mean, I was tying right before this.
Beautiful flies.
Thank you, by the way. I appreciate that. But I sent you some too, didn't I, or no?
No, I was in the running for some, but I wasn't the one that got them, unfortunately.
All right. Well, shoot me your address after this, and I'll send you a box of whatever you want.
Well, I appreciate it.
So I love to tie. So I tie all sorts of stuff. Like I'm tying these like giant size 2 woolly buggers with cone heads on big long 4x long streamer hooks. Like so, but for the most part, like for trout especially, I really only fish basically a June. That's about it. Okay. All the other stuff I fish is basically just for fun. It's just like, oh, will it eat it? Well, yeah, it will, but it's just it's for me. It has nothing to do with the fish whatsoever.
Right.
So like last winter, so right now, if my Tenkara box is basically like 2 patterns in 2 sizes in 2 colors, and one of them's weighted, and that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much all I do. I mean, my Western box is a cornucopia of all sorts of stuff, and I do fish Western flies with Tenkara a fair amount, especially when I'm targeting non-traditional species. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, man, I mean, I fish a June wet fly, whatever you want to call it this week. That's basically what I do. And all the other stuff I tie is just for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your online stuff that we've got going on. You started on Facebook and now Instagram, NewSchoolTenkara. Talk to me about NewSchoolTenkara a little bit.
All right, so NewSchoolTenkara. It's basically so when I started kind of like plugging into the community of Tenkara, there's so many like elitist Tenkara, like it can only be high gradient, wet, unweighted flies, blah, 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 blah. And that's not what I do most of the time. Like trout fishing for me is 4 hours away. I mean, I'm moving up to kind of the driftless area. So, I mean, it'll be every day, and I don't just enjoy fishing for trout, like at all. I don't want to be a one species guy. So basically New School became a place where I could talk about what I was doing with a Tenkara rod, which not a lot of people are doing. You know what I mean? There's a fair amount of people out there that are targeting panfish with them and small bass and stuff. But like, there's not a ton of people that are catching pike and gar and, all the rough fish, carp, buffalo on a Tenkara rod, which I think is a shame because it's the best sight fishing tool ever.
Absolutely.
Ever. Like, no question. No question. So that's kind of what it was. And it was just a place for people to go where they didn't have to deal with, the 2.0 level line dudes who, say they only fish unweighted flies, which if you ever watch, I mean, I don't know about you, man, but I consume massive amounts of YouTube, about Tenkara in particular. And every one of those Japanese guys, man, has a weighted fly in their box. Every one of them.
That's one of the things as I was getting into Tenkara, and I mean, I caught a lot of fish, but I found out that as I, took I Western fly fished for 14 and a half years before I started Tenkara. Mm-hmm. And I found out that as I used some of those flies, all of a sudden I was catching more fish. And, some of that, like you said, you throw on a weighted fly and you get down a little bit deeper, and that's what it takes to get into fish sometimes. Yeah. But one of the things that it took me a little while to figure out was in some of the articles I was reading, I forget who it was, but they went to Japan and they were fishing with some of the guys over there, and they were talking about how, you end up with a few guys that they're only going to use 10 or Kabari style flies, like you run into some of them over here. But a lot of the people that are fishing over there are just using what works, just like a lot of us are.
Well, and that's the thing that that I think a lot of people don't understand is that, like, Tenkara to the Japanese, it's just fishing. Mm-hmm. The reason why there's there's these specific fly patterns is because these guys are fishing the exact same water all the time for the exact same fish. Like, so if you want to target, I mean, they're fishing water, man. I mean, you've seen the videos of what these guys are doing. There's some water like that in Colorado, but like, dude, these fish are in super skinny water. It's crystal clear. They have no choice but to look up. That's all they're doing. There's no fear of predation whatsoever. Like, of course, they're going to be taking unweighted flies off the surface with abandon, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, me, on the other hand, I live in the driftless where the water doesn't move. It's really clear. It's out in the open, and there's eagles everywhere. So like, they're not always going to do that. They're not always going to eat an unweighted fly that's, drifting 6 inches under the surface. Or if you manage to get it in the head of a riffle and plunge it into a pool. Like these, I mean, yeah, they just use what works. Now, obviously, depending on the rod, some stuff works and some stuff doesn't, right? Like, it's, like my Japanese rods, there is no way that I can fish anything other than level line and a very, at the most, like a very lightly weighted fly, because they're like 5.5 action.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
No, absolutely. And I found that out. I have a Nissen rod, and when I got it this last December, I didn't realize how soft of a rod it was. And so I went out with a blowtorch thinking I was going to sling that around, and found out on the first cast that wasn't happening.
Nope. You can do it.
You can.
If you're good at tuck casting and, like you're really good at line manipulation, you can kind of do it. But man, when you do it wrong, it just like, it about jerks the rod out of your hand. I mean,
it was such a jerky feeling that it wasn't natural. And that's part of what got me into Tenkara, is just like you said earlier, it's intuitive. It's natural feeling.
Right. And New School is not in what I'm doing in there is not meant to be intuitive. And it's more of just like, this is what you can do if you really want to. Because you fish a bunch of Rubens rods too, right?
I do, yes.
Yeah, and dude,
Really
all those rods, they don't cast level line. I mean, I love Ruben to death, and I have like 6 of his rods. They cast level line like horribly. Horribly. The baby Rodzilla I cast level line with the baby Rodzilla. The middle fork does it a little bit, but like the T-Hunter, man, holy moly. But that's like my go-to warm water rod.
Right.
I landed like 20-pound carp on that thing, gar, I mean, all sorts of stuff, and it's perfect for that. So for that, I run like the Tenkara Rod Company crossbreed, like an 18-foot line.
Right.
And, dude, that thing is like deadly.
While we're on this topic of Wasatch Tenkara's rods, I'm going to bring up a rod that I got to try a couple weeks ago, and that is the Phoenix Rising. I'm sure you've seen a little bit about it.
I have.
And for anyone that is thinking about getting that rod, don't think about it, just do it.
Yeah. It looks pretty sweet, man. And that was my beef with the Rodzilla when it first came out, was, man, that handle was tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny. And the rod is like ridiculously awesome, but man, you have to be like a strong man to cast that thing one-handed for more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, and I fished the Phoenix Rising, and then immediately afterwards I fished Rodzilla again, just to remind myself what that rod felt like. And I would take Phoenix Rising, which is 4 feet longer than Rodzilla. I would fish that rod over Rodzilla any day because of that spade grip that it has. It's just so comfortable. And if you're fishing somewhere where you're not just casting every couple seconds because it's still water, very slow moving water, you just kind of rest it on your leg and you hold on to the upper grip, and it's just comfortable.
I mean, for sure. I mean, one of the things that I love about Rodzilla is that it's the only rod that Tenkara rod that I've ever fished that I can push the butt into it, the butt towards the fish, and it'll turn anything.
Yeah.
It will turn any fish. The rest of the stuff, you have to, like, if you're fishing for carp, man, and you get something decent on there, if you don't turn that rod over and get on side pressure immediately, you're going to get railroaded, like, but quick.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so that was one of the things I really loved about Rodzilla. Unfortunately, it's just so heavy. So having that extra handle, like I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take mine and I'm going to put like some like bike, you know, like handlebar tape on the top of it so I can use it two-handed more comfortably.
Yeah.
Because it's super fun rod to fish, man.
Oh, absolutely. And the fish that you're catching with it are something that you can't do on any other rod, obviously. The Phoenix Rising, like I hooked into 3 fish on it. A couple about 12-inch trout, and then 1 16-inch trout. And that 16-inch trout felt like a 3-inch trout on the T-Hunter. I mean, it just pulled it right in. There was no fight to it at all.
And that's what I like for carp is for me, it's getting the carp to eat. You know what I mean? So like, as soon as that thing eats and I've got it on, I want that over as soon as humanly possible. I don't want to sit there and like, because I mean, I'm sure you fish for them, dude. Like, if you give them 30 seconds to rest, then you start the whole process over again. You know?
Generally, when I carp fish, I'm gonna let them fight me until they get to that point where they need to rest, and then I'm pulling that sucker in as fast as I possibly can.
Yep, absolutely. But yeah, man. I mean, I think I love Rubin's rods for what they are, and I love all the other rods that I fish for what they are. Like, it's kind of a bummer that more people aren't fishing them, because I think it would be they cast furled line beautifully, you know, and even heavier level line I think they cast pretty well.
Yeah, I was going to make that comment. Is you mentioned level line with them earlier. I do personally, all of Rubin's rods, I fish a level line. The smallest level line I'm using, if I'm using a Wasatch rod, is going to be a 3.5.
Right, exactly. You know, but like, it's like the everyman's rod.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like the perfect person. It's perfect for the person who's like, I just want to go fishing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember when Rodzilla came out, dude, there was that guy that was bait fishing with it and caught like that 20-pound catfish or something.
Yeah, head catfish.
Yeah, dude. Like, I mean, and that's awesome. Because a lot of people, I think what happens to them too, especially with the TUSA rods, and well, just the lighter, more kind of Japanesey type rods, what happens is they break it or they jam a section, and then they're like, this is done.
Yep.
You know, they don't get it. It feeds into what their preconceived notion is that a Tenkara rod is really frail and weak, which is obviously, we both know, not the truth.
Absolutely.
But go ahead.
No, I was just, on that note, I mean, if I thought that a Tenkara rod was weak, next month I'm going to target sturgeon on the Phoenix Rising. So
that's sweet.
I wouldn't do that if a Tenkara rod was weak.
That's big fish like that are kind of like, I kind of really like fishing Tenkara for big stuff. It's really fun. And I gotta tell you, man, even the like 12-foot rods, you know, the Amagos and the, you know, and the those rods handle really big fish.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, I caught a 23-inch brown on the Samurai, and that's like the closest to a 6.4 action rod that he had at that time. It was pretty soft, and
yeah.
I want to say it was in one of the shorter modes too, which I found a lot. Like, when you fish his zoom rods, do you find that they fish the best in like the middle, if it's like a triple zoom?
Yeah. So what I've noticed every rod I have except for one that I actually fish. I mean, I've got a couple cheapos off of Amazon that I don't touch, but every zoom rod I have, I've found that the middle section is normally the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
you get into that shorter section and it'll cast all right, but it's a little bit stiffer there. You get into that longer section and it just changes the balance just enough that you're going to feel it.
Yep.
That middle section seems to be the sweet spot with pretty much any zoom rod, at least in my experience.
The only rod that I have that I like fishing in the shortest length is that when I can get away with it is the T-Hunter.
I agree with you on that.
For whatever reason, that 12-foot length in the T-Hunter is money. It's so easy to cast, and I love that rod, man. I can't even tell you how many big, angry fish have been through that rod.
Oh, yeah. I will remedy something I said a little bit ago. Every rod except for Darth Quattro that is made by Wasatch, I fish with a 3.5. Darth Quattro, I'm using like a 2 or a 1.5 if I can find a 1.5, because it's just such a soft rod. I got it in the 6.4. I didn't go down to the 5.4 even. And it's just such a soft rod that you go heavier than that with the level line and you're wishing you had not close to that.
Right.
But,
I mean, go ahead.
No, you're good.
I mean, I fish a 3.5 and a 3.0 pretty much exclusively. It's windy up here, man. And I don't feel the need to go any lighter. That's really what it is. I could, and I have tried it out, but I don't see the benefit really.
And that's the same with, I'm in Utah, obviously, and Utah, it's just windy so often that if you go smaller than a 3.5, you're getting blown off of the water half of the time.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a Sakasa on and the wind is up, you can kind of sail it a little bit, and that's sort of cool. But in reality, that's more for us than the fish. I don't think that, when you start integrating kind of the wind into your presentation, that you're really getting all that. You're not putting it in front of fish at all. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I mean, it doesn't make that big of difference. Your presentation is to a point when you're fishing, your presentation matters when it's in the water. But what happens when you're flipping your line around, getting it to the water isn't going to affect things that much.
Mm-mm. The only time I've had the wind be my friend is if it just so happened that the wind was allowing me to lay the fly on the water. So, if it was at my back and I was, casting, you know what I mean? I can kind of you can, how you've done it. You just kind of reach cast a little bit and it just kind of flops.
Yeah.
And when that time, that helps sometimes. But for the most part, it's, it's just I mean, it's like Euro nymphing, right? Oh my God, the wind is not your friend in this situation, which is another thing that completely baffles me about these Euro guys that just hate Tenkara. And
it's a perfect tool for the job.
It is the perfect tool for tight line nymphing. The perfect tool. In fact, Rob Worthing basically started that fixed line company with his buddy, the Riverworks or whatever, for that exact purpose.
Yeah.
I've decided, I was talking about this the other day online. I was I've decided that what it is that they refuse to admit that for a maximum of $400, they could get a better tool than their $2,000 Euro rig that they have.
Have you seen, speaking of Euro nymphing, have you seen the little spools that they're making now to put on the handle instead of a reel? It's just a little spot to wind their line up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's how much closer to Tenkara can you get without buying a Tenkara rod?
Right. And it's more sensitive.
It is.
Dude, that River Peak rod that I have, that Kiwami 33, holy cow, man. If I've got a Sakasa on there that's pretty fluffy, I can feel the micro currents pushing that fly around subsurface.
That's insane.
It's nuts, dude. It's nuts. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And, people were just like, well, I mean, like today I was pan fishing. I had a little woolly bugger on, here, everything's starting to bed right now. And it's like the time of year when they bed, but there's nothing for them to guard. So as soon as somebody comes up to the bank, they're just like out of there.
Yeah.
So I had this tiny little woolly bugger on, and I didn't feel like changing my fly. So I just skated the thing across the surface with, because I've got all that reach and the line short, and you can run the fly any which way you want. Any fly.
It's crazy. Speaking of different rods and things like that, how many rods do you have?
12 or 13, I think.
Okay. I think I'm sitting right at 10 right now. I'm getting one for my wife. I'm going to pick up a Samurai probably next month.
That rod is sweet, dude. That rod is super sweet.
Yeah, I fished it for the first time the same day I fished the Phoenix Rising. And it's a very nice rod. I will gladly get one of those for my wife and let her, because she's not into fishing really, but she gets bored with it. And so I think this is going to be the gateway to be like, look, you don't have to be bored when you're fishing.
Right. My wife is the most beautiful Tenkara caster you'd ever see. She can cast a Tenkara rod like she would give Oni a run for his money, but she hates catching fish.
Really?
Yes. So her thing is she would sit there creekside and cast all day long, if only it meant that she wouldn't actually catch anything. When she catches a fish, she's like, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, she's done.
So just start cutting the bend off of all of her hooks. So she's just casting the upper part of the fly.
Right.
She still get bites and try to set the hook, but she ain't landing anything.
Exactly. My luck, man, she'd have some like monster or something come up and just gut hook her, just swallow the whole thing or whatever. But yeah, I mean,
is if there's no actual hook on there, you could just pull it out if you need to.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about Tenkara too is it's so cheap to fix, man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a breaker of rods, dude. I have 4 broken Western rods sitting in my house right now. I break not as many Tenkara rods, actually. I actually break them less often.
I was gonna say, when I was Western fly fishing, I have 2 broken Western rods in my storage unit, and I've not broke a single Tenkara rod, and I've been doing it for almost 5 years now.
The only time I've broken Tenkara rods is if I wasn't paying attention when I was walking through the woods, and I just like slammed the tip into a tree. I've done that like twice. I broke one on a fish, but it was kind of like a fluke. And then the other thing I do is because since I run like tippet that's like way not rated for the rod, like I'll run 0, on if I need to,
On Hunter all the time.
Right. But if you get a carp that straightens you out and takes off, or you get hung up with 0x on, you jam that tip section, no questions asked.
Yeah.
So that's really the only time that I actually break them is when I jam a tip section.
That makes sense. I mean, the tip section's so small that most rod breaks are the tip section. And if it's not the tip section, you probably closed it in a car door or hit a tree.
Dude, I broke my Imago 3rd section from the bottom on a buffalo.
Dang.
Yeah. I was gar fishing, and it was before I started fishing Reuben stuff. And I had like this. So the flies I tie for gar, they look kind of like barracuda flies, only like in miniature. They're like unweighted, and they just have a little EP off the back and some, really light dumbbell, not even dumbbell eyes, like chain bead eyes. And I was sitting there and I was fishing for gar, but it was windy, so I couldn't see anything. And I'm walking along the bank, and all of a sudden I see like all these like buffalo. They're just like sitting like head up in the surface, just like sucking something off the top, And I was like, all right, well, what the hell? So I shot it out there, and just as it opened his mouth, the fly dropped in, and he just sucked it down his gullet. And I set, and this thing was massive, dude. It was like 20 pounds, like no questions asked. It was huge, and it just like jumped and did all this crazy stuff, and it broke. And I just muscled it had I been patient, it probably wouldn't have broke. But I was just like, man, I just want this over. And I just like muscled it a little bit and just like folded on me.
It happens to the best of us, right? I mean, we all get excited.
For sure. You can't be afraid to lose flies or break rods, man.
100%. If you're worried about either of those things, then fishing probably is not for you.
It's not for you, no.
So we've talked a little bit about Tenkara fishing in your area. Let's talk a little bit more about it. You mentioned the driftless. You mentioned some warm water species. With where you're at right now, obviously the warm water is a little bit more what you're doing. Is that right?
Kind of. I mean, I'm going to the northeast corner. I'm going to the driftless a bunch. I mean, I go up there probably 3 to 4 times a month. It's a 4-hour drive, and I spend a couple days up there. The warm water stuff this time of year becomes a lot more about carp. A whole bunch about carp and rough fish. So, I mean, I fish about 200 days a year, give or take. So there's got to be some panfish pond days in there to just kind of like fill it out, which I highly recommend that people do, by the way. Like, man, you learn just as much playing an angry crappie or an angry bluegill as you do playing a trout. And I would argue that a 9-inch bluegill fights 3 times harder than a 9-inch trout all day long, twice on Sunday.
Yep.
So, and the nice thing about the pan fishing is you get a chance to kind of test your skills a little bit, but you also, since they eat everything, you get to test your presentation methods. You can play around, with different things. So like, I don't think it's, anyway, yes. So I'm doing a lot of warm water stuff. Sorry, I kind of digressed there a little bit.
You're good.
I'm doing a lot of warm water stuff close to home. It becomes a lot about carp. And then the driftless is like the best ever. Like, hands down, far and away, the best trout fishing, with the exception of like Wyoming and those like go to the middle of nowhere places where there's like 30-inch rainbows just like swimming around, like wanting to eat like dry flies and stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
But for like the little small stream stuff, man, the driftless is fantastic. It's fantastic. It's all Spring Creek basically, so it runs year round. It's clear pretty much all year round. And it's just like it's just an amazing fishery, man. Like, it's just, the smallmouth fishing here is absurd. It's so good. So good. Which if there's people who haven't targeted smallmouth with a Tenkara rod, you are missing out.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I know I get asked a lot by people that are looking at Tenkara fishing, because when people think Tenkara, they think trout for the most part.
Sure.
We've talked about several different species, smallmouth, bluegill, obviously, carp. What are you doing that's different when you're targeting those warm water species than you're doing when you're targeting trout?
Nothing different. Nothing. I fish for smallmouth the exact same way I fish for trout. Only the kabari is slightly larger. So if you really wanted to stick to your guns and only fish Tenkara style with a kabari, just tie yourself up a couple onis. Those big, massive, Sakasas that he ties that he through. They take it for a crayfish all day long. I'm using all the same principles. So all the same presentation techniques that you would use in advanced Tenkara, manipulating your fly, upstream presentation, all that stuff that you use that in warm water. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. I've caught everything that I catch, with the exception of pike, on a Sakasa. Everything. And not small either. Like, the only time I think it's different is when you're carp fishing, because you can't make that much noise around carp. It's really just, you're using the Tenkara rod to get it accurately where you want it. And then it's a really great drag and drop tool as well, because it's so long. But man, carp will eat Sakasa all day long. All day long. They love them. But yeah, I mean, I don't really do that much differently, you know. I mean, it's the same. It's the same as trout. It really is. Like, trout are not that smart. Everyone thinks that they're like these like super amazing animals that like are intuitive and telepathic and like all. They're really not. What they are good at is sorting. So all day long, they sit there in the current and they go food, not food, food, not food. So that they're really good at. But other than that, man, like they're not. You know, it's not rocket science.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I would say with trout is, I mean, people are like, oh, these trout in this place, they have a doctorate, and it's because they're, like I said, they're really good at sorting. They get so much pressure. They've seen every fly come through. That unless your presentation, those are the few times your presentation does matter in those situations.
Sure. There's definitely times, man, where presentation matters, but that's when you're sitting there banging your head up against the wall, trying to fish at fish that are just they're all negative because they've been fished by everybody in this under the sun. You just came to the pool, some dude just was bombing casts at him 5 minutes before you came. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
of course, man. I mean, yes, that makes it difficult to fish for trout. But like what I tell people with carp fishing is like, well, how do you carp fish? Well, the first thing you do before you even get a line wet is you learn how to identify feeding fish, which nobody does. No, they're always like, oh, it's so difficult. It's not. If you can find a fish that's feeding, you've tripled your chance. So I went out not yesterday. I don't remember. Whenever it was, I posted about carp last. It's like 3 or 4 days ago. I got 5 fish to eat. I landed 3. I kid you not, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fish. None of them were feeding, you know, and it's the same with trout. You know, you've done it. You walk upstream and you see these things zipping upstream or downstream or even casually going up or downstream. They're not eating. They're moving. They're going somewhere.
Yep.
That fish is not eating, you know. So I don't do a lot that's different, to be perfectly honest with you. I just use all those techniques and adapt to whatever forage I think that is going to get it done for me. You know what I mean? And by forage, I mean not a specific fly. I mean like size, color shade, profile. That's it. You know?
So what are the things you're looking for with carp specifically to tell if they're feeding or not? I know, I mean, everyone knows you're looking for trout and things like that. You're looking for the bubbles on the top of the water. You're looking for things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The trout is just slowly moving back and forth in the current. What are you looking for with carp and other species?
Carp are way easier because they're very obvious when they eat. And I'm not blind casting for carp ever. So the first recommendation I say is find a place where they are and just go there and watch them. They do all sorts of stuff. They're super predatory. Like the commons are really predatory. Like I've been sitting on like mills and dams and stuff, and I'll see them herding bait fish up into the rocks and just like crushing them. You know, so what I'm looking for obviously is the tailing and the, you know, the rooting around and all that. A lot of times I target a lot of fish that are feeding on the surface, believe it or not, because they'll kind of come up in the surface film and just sort of like, just kind of like root around and feel around. And a lot of times that's when that fish is, because you've approached this fish that's all obviously looking up. So like, if that fish is still there, it's a pretty prime target. You can pretty much drag that fly across the surface, and I almost like bump them in the face with it a lot of the times. I think the biggest thing is that you can't, a lot of people, they think you can cast directly to it, and you can't, ever, almost. Very rarely.
Right.
Their feeding plate is, you know, their feeding zone is about the size of a dinner plate. And people think they need to hit that dinner plate, and that's not what you need to do. You need to cast beyond that dinner plate, and you need to drag it back to that spot and let it settle in front of them. I mean, and they're moody too. I mean, like, dude, I've had times I put it, like the other day, one of the ones I caught, I had a little kind of like wormy looking thing on, and I casted by it, past it, and the wind kicked up or something, and I went way beyond it, and I was dragging back to try to like get in front of it real quick, dude, and that thing caught the flash of that fly out of the corner of its eye and turned on it and just like yoked it, like, just, you know what I mean? Like, I think people they just, I think people do this a lot with, even with trout fishing, and that's one of the things that Tenkara teaches that, Western doesn't either, is its move. Go 3 or 4 casts, and then get out of there, get out of that spot. Chill out now.
Not a problem. All right. So anyways, like I was saying, a lot of people are always asking, they're like, how are you catching more fish? And the easiest answer I can come up with is, with Western fly fishing, if I see a hole that I know there's fish in 50 feet away, I'm going to cast to that hole. With Tenkara, you can't do that. So you're fishing all of the water leading up to that, which in turn is leading to you catching more fish.
Absolutely. You're fishing more diligently, but you're also fishing faster because there's just stuff that you can't get to. So you have to move your feet, which is one of the things that I tell every guide client that I have, if they haven't been fishing more than a couple of years, is move your feet, man. Move your feet. Like, even in the same hole, move your feet.
Yeah.
I teach the kind of the square, the fish in a square, and I can't remember who the guy is specifically that came up with it, but it's not my idea. I saw it on Discover Tenkara. It's in one of their things, and for anybody that's watching this that wants to really geek out on Tenkara, Paul and John are like the biggest Tenkara geeks like ever of all time. Like, those guys are awesome. They know a bunch. I have at least one of Paul's books, and he's super cool. But anyway, yeah, just move your feet. Like, move your feet. I cover more water because I move my feet more. I reapproach. I try different angles. I try different presentations. Because with the Western rod, you're always focused on what spot you can hit, right? Because you can vary fast. With a Tenkara rod, there's really not that much variance in distance. I mean, it's only effective kind of to a certain, unless you change your line, right, or your rod. So you then you start switching up your presentation. Like, I would say probably my go-to, even before I dead drift a fly, or a kabari, is pulsing it, is kind of like just bouncing it downstream. And if that doesn't work, then I try dead drift. If that doesn't work, I try upstream. If that doesn't work, I try to like push the fly deeper. Like, you've got you're targeting so many different areas of the water column that you're bound to bump into more fish.
Yeah.
When you have an indicator rig on, man, which, don't get me wrong, I love indicator fishing. I love watching that little bobber go down. It's super fun, and a lot of people do it, and it's really effective. But that presentation doesn't change. And moreover, even if you do animate that thing a little bit, it doesn't change its position in the water column at all.
No, 100%. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is water current is going to put your fly where it's going to put your fly. I mean, right. if you throw on a super heavy fly, yeah, you can change that a little bit, but for the most part, your fly is going through the current where it's going through the current.
Sure. But half the game is figuring out where to put the fly so that the current puts it where you want it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got that stream behind you, that creek behind you. I mean, there's 7 different channels that I'm looking at right there, and you've got to put your fly, if you want to target that little riffle that's running over your right shoulder, you've got to put that, you can't put it next to the beige rock. You got to put it next to the black rock. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
So, and that's,
this stream behind me is actually, I've caught fish from this lower corner over here all the way up through. I mean, there's not a section on this little piece of stream that I haven't caught a fish before. It's like you said, there's just so many different spots that you're looking when you're on the stream that a lot of people just walk past and they're not even glancing.
Right. Because you can cast farther.
Mm-hmm.
You can cast farther. So But with a Tenkara rod, you got to pick that water apart, and that's how competition anglers do it, and that's why they're good. Because I mean, that's where this Euro thing. It's not like a recreational. Well, I mean, it is recreational, but it comes from competition angling, right? So like these guys, they get points for how many fish they catch.
Yeah.
So
It's not
they
about size, it's about quantity.
exactly. So they pick the water apart, and that's why Tenkara is so awesome because it allows you to do that.
Yep.
Or just toss some Sakasa, black Sakasa in there and wait for some fish to eat it.
Absolutely. I mean, simple flies catch fish, complicated flies can catch fish, but I catch more on simple flies than I catch on anything.
I think simple flies are more beautiful. I think, I tie the Gallup stuff every once in a while for friends and all that stuff. I think those are some of the ugliest flies ever. I do not fish a Clouser minnow ever because I think it's an ugly fly. It works. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It works, but I don't like to fish it because it's ugly. And I think the Sakasa are beautiful, and I think that they're elegant, and I think they catch fish. And like, I don't think you need. I think you need size, profile, and color. Not a specific color, just a shade, and you're good.
I agree with that. Then I had something else that I was going to go to right after that, and I lost my spot on my paper. Oh, right there. What is for you? What does an ideal trip look like when you're going out with a Tenkara rod?
It's not about size, quantity. I want to be outside. Obviously, I want to be in a place that's not this pretty in some way. It could be even in town. It doesn't matter. The water itself has to be pretty, and I just have to feel like I figured it out. That's all I care about. I don't care if I catch 100 fish. I don't care if I catch 2 fish. I don't care if I catch a giant fish or a bunch of little ones or whatever. I just have to go, okay, I figured out where the fish were sitting, and I figured out how to I just figured I cracked the code.
Yeah.
And for the Western guys, it's cracking the code with what, they're eating a prince nymph and not a pheasant tail, which is BS. But for me, it's just like, okay, I'm figuring out where they're sitting in the water column. I'm figuring out what type of water they're holding in. And yeah, that's the ideal. Oh, and coffee. There has to be streamside coffee. Like,
There, you take your thermos out with you, and you're ready to go.
oh no 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 no. I have a whole. So my coffee kit takes up more room than all of my fly fishing gear when I'm fishing Tenkara combined.
All right.
I have a stove and a press. It's titanium because I'm a super big nerd. You know what I mean? Like I love making streamside coffee.
Okay.
And it also forces you to slow down, which a lot of
Yeah.
people don't either. So I don't care if you don't like coffee. Make tea, have a snack, take a picture, whatever it is you need to do, just slow down and enjoy it. It's not a race.
I like that. What do you carry in your bag when you're going Tenkara fishing? Obviously, your coffee stuff.
I carry my coffee stuff. I have 1 box of flies. I have 2. So this is strictly Tenkara, me by myself.
Yeah.
And it too, right? Some days I tell myself I'm taking 1 rod and only what fits in my pockets, and that's it. And I think there's a great appeal to that, and I think you learn a lot doing that. And it's usually a minimal fly box. I mean, I've gone out some days with like 3 flies, 3 kabari, and just said like, hey, this is what I'm doing today. What can I learn? Which I highly recommend. Because having all the flies means you're going to fish all the flies. Our default is to change the fly if we have more to try. But so net, I just have like a crappy hand net that I use. I will sometimes take 2 rods depending on how far I'm going. Just because if I happen to break something, then I can just keep fishing. I'm just kind of
Right.
jealous. My coffee kit, I said 1 fly box, 2 tippet, nippers. Also, baby wipes, very, very, very important. Not Tenkara related, but in life, you should always have baby wipes. But yeah, it's not a lot of stuff. And like, I have a little bag of lines that I carry with me too. Now, when I'm guiding, it's a whole nother thing, man. I've got like a backpack with a first aid kit and like,
Yeah, you and me both.
yeah, I mean, you know what it's like. It's
Yeah, my guide pack weighs like 15 to 20 pounds, and I hate packing it around.
Yes, yes. I have like the sweetest fish pond backpack ever. Like one of the old Ridgelines that came with the chest strap already on it. And the day that I have to put that on is generally like not my favorite day.
Yeah, I've got my Allen chest pack that I wear when I normally go, but I've got an Allen backpack as well. And when I guide, that chest pack has clips on it to where it'll clip straight onto the backpack. And when I do that, it's not a fun trip for me.
No. I mean, I love watching other people catch fish. Like,
Oh yeah,
and I enjoy. I mean, it's a cool job, dude. I mean, we get paid to watch people fish, but like,
Mm.
and help them fish. But I mean, for me, if I can go out with what's in my pockets, I've accomplished something. That's pretty sweet.
yeah, no, and I will specify as well. I'm not saying I don't like guiding. Obviously, I like it, or I wouldn't do it.
Right.
But it's not pleasant to carry around all the extra weight when you go out. It's
No.
just like you said, it's nice to be able to just throw in what's in your pocket or just your little chest pouch or whatever and just call it a day.
Right. I used to carry that the Zimmerbilt, their I think it's the guide light sling or whatever, the really, really minimal one.
Okay.
And that one was pretty cool, but it didn't have any structure to it. So like everything just kind of bounced around in there, and it like I wish that thing had like two divider pockets, and it would be like the greatest Tenkara bag like ever made in the history of man. But mainly I just use like just a little sling with just minimal stuff in it, you know. Yeah.
Sweet. And then is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like we should have talked about?
That is such a good question. And I've been thinking about this all day today, and I thought of a million things that we should talk about that I totally don't think we talked about, and I can't even think of them off the top of my head at all.
Of course not. I put you on the spot. It just all floods out the side of your head.
Usually pretty good though being on the spot actually, and for whatever reason, I think it's maybe your incredible good looks that's really throwing me off.
You know, every now and then I just got to put people in their place, right?
I mean, it's a burden, isn't it? I mean, I, I think that if I could say anything, I would say, man, just like don't listen to what other people say about Tenkara. I mean, I know we're all doing it, right? But like, I really think it's an individual experience. It really, really is. And I mean, I have a customer who I tie for, and she fishes soft plastics on her Tenkara. She has a Hellbender. Hi, Ellie, if you're watching. And she has a blast. Has an absolute blast. The last time I tied for her, she's like, I have this thing. It's called a Mighty Mite. It's basically like a little crappie jig. And she's like, can you tie me a fly that looks like that? And I was like, absolutely. So I sent her like 6 or 7 of them, and she's crushing it, man. She's having fun, just
That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Like, have fun with it. It's fishing. This is, it's supposed to be fun. So I used to work in the cycling industry, and people would say, they'd come in, the first thing they would say, I'm a big fat dude, by the way, in case you haven't ever seen a selfie of me. I'm a big giant dude, right? I weigh like 250. They'd come in, and, I was dressed in all the cycling gear. I mean, I got the nose ring and all the tattoos and, all the stuff that says, hey, I'm a hipster cyclist. And the first thing they'd say to me, if they were kind of like feeling a little intimidated, was like, I'm not a cyclist. And I go, well, you ride a bike, right? Well, yeah, then you're a cyclist. And I think a lot of people think that about fly fishing in general, and Tenkara specifically too, is, well, I'm not an angler. Well, if you're fishing, then you're an angler. Like, just go out. You know what I mean? Like, learn from each other, have fun. And like, that's what really New School is about, man. It's like people being able to just like empower themselves to do whatever they want. I mean, it's, so anyway.
All right. Well, last question for you. Where can people find you and follow your journey?
Oh, that's easy. New School Tenkara on Facebook, New School Tenkara on Instagram. You can come see me in the Driftless at Rod and Rivet Fly Shop on Water Street. You can send me a message. I'm on TikTok too, but I think it's New School Tenkara maybe. But I have a very controversial relationship with TikTok. I'm not sure. I'm like 50. I think I'm too old to use TikTok. Like I don't understand the algorithm. It's a lot of weird stuff. Yeah, just send me a message, man. And I encourage anybody anytime if you have any question, if you just want to BS or you want to ask me about stuff, just message me. I mean, we've messaged each other. We've been messaging each other for what, like a year at least already?
Yeah, at least. I mean, I don't even remember how long I've been on your new school page on Facebook, but I mean, we've messaged off and on through comments and stuff on there, and a couple times before that, even just through Facebook Messenger. So
Yeah. If anybody has a way to contact me, then you should contact me that way if you want to. Like, don't people should not be intimidated about like you're gonna bug me or whatever. Like, ask me anything. I'm totally down. Like that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I mean, that's what all this stuff is about. It's not. I'd be happy the rest of my life to just sit and tie flies and take my pictures of them and show them to my wife because she says they're all really pretty, which is great, even though I know they're not. Um, so like I'm doing this like for other people. Like I would like nothing better than to rally up with somebody, who's locally getting into Tenkara fishing or whatever. That's actually one of the things I do in my guiding is if I take you out locally, like to where I am. I mean, the driftless and trout fishing is another deal. But
yeah,
if I take you warm water fishing, any style, any angle, I charge you one time and that's it. Like that's it. And then if you want to go fishing with me again, you hit me up. If I can go, I go. You know, I just want people to get on the water. That's why I do all of this. So,
all right. Well, perfect. Thank you very much for taking some time to talk with me today, Dre. And thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast. If you have any questions for myself or recommendations for the show, feel free to message me or on my Instagram page at Let's Talk Tenkara, or you can shoot me over an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. And then we are still looking for people to fill in other states. Thank you, Dre, for hitting Iowa for us. And thank you to my previous two guests who hit Tennessee and as well as Pennsylvania. We've still got a lot of states to go before we're at 50, and some of the states are definitely going to be harder to hit than others, but I'm looking forward to being able to get in touch with you guys out there and share that information with the rest of the Tenkara world. So feel free to shoot me over an email if you're interested in being on the show, or if you know someone that might be, shoot me over an email or a message, and we'll look forward to speaking with you. And until next time, thank you guys very much, and you have a great rest of your day.
This has been the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast, hosted by Brendan Harden. Special guest, Dre Fornasiero. You can reach Dre on his Facebook or Instagram at NewSchoolTenkara. You can reach out to us on Instagram at Let's Talk Tenkara, or shoot us an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out with any suggestions or recommendations for future episodes. If you are interested in joining us for an episode, please shoot us a message. We'd love to chat. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next time, and Let's Talk Tenkara, a Salt Lake Tenkara production.